Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Scene to Screen Film Podcast. I'm Kieran, that's AJ, and this is our spoiler-free review of Marvel's Black Panther. Before we get into this review, I want to talk for a second about expectations, because walking into this film, I was really excited, and I don't remember being that excited for a film since maybe The Force Awakens, so it's fair to say that I had a lot of really big expectations, and honestly, I feel like I walked out even happier than I expected to. But before I get more into that, what were your expectations walking in to see Black Panther?
I was certainly excited. I've mentioned before that T'Challa Black Panther was my favourite of the Marvel heroes when I was younger. Thanos as well, and a few others like Galactus. But T'Challa of the kind of, the Avengers, the heroes, it had to be Black Panther just because, he's a great character. He's kind of, I'd say he's probably, apart from the Punisher, closest to Batman in the comics. He's quite an anti-hero, so I was really buzzed about going in and seeing him getting his own full film. Thought he was great in Civil War. Thought Chadwick Boseman was brilliant. I was pretty hyped.
So we might as well start with the basics, and I think the easiest way of getting this review done is for you to give me your review and then I'll give you mine. So why don't we start with you telling us what you thought of Black Panther?
Right, I may as well start off just kind of by being kind of blunt. To me, it mostly just felt like another Marvel film. Obviously, huge fan of Black Panther when I was younger, not just because his costume is awesome, and to be fair, it still is awesome, just because of how well layered a character he is, often blurring the lines of hero and anti-hero in a way similar to Batman or the Punisher, like I mentioned before. Chadwick Boseman does do a great job of putting across how sort of complex T'Challa is, but there aren't really enough scenes that truly develop him in a sort of anti-heroic way. Boseman did describe him as an anti-hero as well, so I was kind of hoping they'd go for that angle more. He is a flawed character for sure, but I don't think he crosses over into anti-hero at any point, really. But there aren't enough scenes that truly develop him as a character in a way that other Marvel films, such as Iron Man 3 or Guardians of the Galaxy 2 did for their respective central characters. Likewise, Michael B. Jordan presents a fascinating adversary in Eric Killmonger, but he only appears properly at what feels like the halfway point of the film, so a lot of him enacting his master plan feels kind of rushed, and the payoff doesn't feel entirely earned at the end. Daniel Kaluuya is another absolutely incredible actor, but he doesn't really have much of substance to deliver. His character's basically a series of plot beat cliches that we've seen in so many other films, although his dancing is absolutely brilliant. But like many other Marvel films, Black Panther felt kind of bloated in that kind of Age of Ultron way. There were two entire scenes before we even get to our hero properly. The subplot introduced in the second scene is important, but the way that the film balances it makes it less interesting than it should have been. I feel like the film should have just got to the central conflict earlier, because as it is, it feels more like a bunch of TV episodes mashed together, with the tension and action beats playing out at kind of random points, leaving it, to me at least, feeling a bit messy and not as well constructed as it could have been. And many of the fight scenes were filmed in a kind of headache-inducing manner for me, similar to the Bourne films. Lots and lots of cuts, shaky camera, very dark. It's very hard to see what's going on in a lot of these fights. I think it would have been interesting if Coogler or Disney were to have taken a bit of a chance and filmed the fight scenes more fluidly in a way reminiscent of how Black Panther himself fights in. We're talking like Daredevil Series 1 kind of fights. They're really interesting, sort of, not necessarily one take, but a lot more sort of movement, just focusing on what's going on and kind of snapping between places. They do that in the Avengers as well to absolutely great effect. As it is, I often felt as bored through the fight scenes as I did through many of the dialogue scenes, which are kind of shot in that usual static MCU style where it's just shot, reverse shot, slightly different shot, reverse shot. Essentially, it feels like the work of Disney Marvel, not the work of a singular director-creator, much like Guardians or Thor Ragnarok did. For me, this leaves the film feeling kind of stagnant and recycled for much of it. However, Black Panther does still succeed on a number of things. As mentioned, a lot of the acting is great, even if some of it feels occasionally forced. But that's more to do, I think, with the script than the actors. Lupita Nyong'o plays another rather generically written character, but she plays it with such a great deal of compassion and fervour, proving her character as T'Challa's equal and not just a love interest. Letitia Wright provided some great quips, making standard script one-liners into genuine witticisms with her on-point delivery and timing. My two standout performances would have to be Danai, Gurira, and Andy Serkis. Gurira plays the kind of character you always want on your side, immensely cunning, intelligent, a skilled fighter, although her guarded demeanour allows her to keep her hand hidden until her powers are needed. Her deadpan delivery made for some of the most humorous moments in the film. Serkis plays his part with rough abandon, and although his accent occasionally seems to slip, the performance itself is just so strong that watching him scheme about with villainous relish is just great fun on its own. The score is a brilliant touch, giving the new setting the cultural feel it deserves. The composer, Ludwig Göransson, his decision to work with local musicians from around Africa means that this does not just feel like Marvel plays the music of Heartland Africa, but instead feels genuine, and due to this, it is easily one of the best things about the film. Some of the other parts of the soundtrack don't work quite as well, although I do still like them a deal, but I don't think they work quite as well as they could have. Mainly the trap beats that seem to play every time Killmonger is doing something. It's essentially just the same piece of music every time, and the first time it was quite cool, and by the third time I was kind of a bit confused why they were just overusing this one piece of music for him. And likewise, the bouncy pop track that plays when the end title comes up seemed incredibly out of place. Finally, I thought that the themes were well handled, actually, overall. There were a couple of heavy-handed moments, but most of those came from the mouth of Killmonger, so it kept in line with the rest of his character, making these very revolutionary, extreme reactionary statements. I liked the way that the story didn't provide any kind of a literal metaphor for the world's events, and instead just raised some differing points of view and weighed them up through the actions of the characters. I liked the central theme of seclusion versus joining a larger community. It's a message that is very applicable in a personal sense to humans today, encouraging them to open up to those around them and to make a better society. The debate about Wakanda's military strength and the idea that it could provide revolutionary aid was also interesting. Again, refusing to provide a direct link to any specific real-world situation, but it still ends up being very applicable to the state of the world at large. T'Challa's dealings in all of this and the way that he represents one point of view, and Killmonger is this extreme alternative, is just such a great metaphor for things that are happening in the world right now, regardless of any other kind of cultural trappings. I mean, you know, it's basically the whole idea of, yes, the current method that we're working in, it's flawed and it has problems, and a lot of people, they get an alternative and they just rush to it and they just go, okay, well, if we're not going to do it this way, let's do it the complete extreme opposite. And there are lots of interesting developments with that throughout the film that I think is really good. Good writing, if not, you know, an overall sense of good writing rather than the script itself. Overall, though, I just didn't think that stand-up performances and an interesting handling of messages stopped this film from being ruthlessly generic for much of the runtime. It was just too bloated, overly long, and straight up average to break the Marvel mold in the way that I really hoped it might. However, I've noticed that I often seem to enjoy Marvel sequels a lot more than their original counterparts. Usually the first film is very weighed down by the universe they're trying to set up. So I'm hoping that Black Panther 2 gives me the fully fledged T'Challa kick that I was looking for. I'm feeling a light to decent 7 on this one personally.
So where I want to start with my review is to talk about the story and the narrative, because for me, Black Panther is easily one of the most impressive superhero films and superhero stories that I've ever seen. One of the things that I keep thinking about after seeing the film is how impressed I was with Ryan Coogler's ability to tell a compelling and an entertaining story that stands as a really good film and isn't overly connected to the larger universe. One of my favourite things about Black Panther is that it's not held back by the need to set up future installments of the franchise or fit in any ridiculous cameos or anything like that, and that gives Ryan Coogler a chance to construct his own story, introduce his own version of the characters, and tell a personal character-driven story about this iconic superhero. And I would say that this is probably the most character-driven and emotional film that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has ever produced, because at its core, Black Panther isn't about one guy who thinks one thing fighting another guy who thinks a different thing. the film certainly has some of those elements, especially between T'Challa and Killmonger. But at its core, Black Panther is an incredibly deep and emotional story about a young man who's still coming to terms with the death of his father and balancing the impossible responsibilities of becoming the new king of Wakanda with his duties as the Black Panther. And we really get to see how each of those elements come together, and they really do all meet in this really cool and interesting way. And I feel that because of that, T'Challa becomes one of the more compelling and unique and badass characters in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. And talking about T'Challa, I think Chadwick Boseman was fantastic in this film. I've seen a lot of the reviews say that his performance was overshadowed by Michael B. Jordan and a few of the others, and I kind of get what they mean, but portraying that character, I thought Chadwick Boseman did a great job, because reading the comics, I always saw T'Challa as a more stoic and kingly figure, and that kind of character can seem quite unadventurous and boring compared to someone like Killmonger, so I can get why some people might be more attracted and more impressed by some of the other performances, but for me, Boseman's ability to portray T'Challa as a character who can't rule by emotion and needs to kind of stay objective most of the time was really cool, and that made all the emotional moments and the scenes in the ancestral plane with T'Chaka, that made all of those moments more moving and more impressive. So yeah, I'm really excited about Chadwick Boseman in this film and for his future in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. As for the other characters, Lupita Nyong'o did an incredible job in this film. She brought a lot of strength and power to Nakia, and she was really believable and strong as a love interest for T'Challa. Danai Gurira as Okoye, the leader of the Dora Milaje, she absolutely dominates every single one of her scenes. Some of you guys might know her as Michonne in The Walking Dead, but in Black Panther she plays such an incredibly badass character and steals more than a few of the best scenes. Walking out of the film, one of the things that really surprised me was Winston Duke as M'Baku, who is the leader of the Jabari tribe. He wasn't in a lot of the marketing for the film, and I walked out really impressed by his performance, and I really want to see that character in more of the future films, which I have a feeling we will. I think I might have spotted him in the Infinity War trailer, so I think he does have a future in the franchise. But probably my favourite character in the entire film was Letitia Wright as T'Challa's younger sister Shuri, who's in charge of Wakanda's technology, so she's really smart, like almost to the point where if Iron Man was the smartest guy we've met so far in the MCU, she's like 1,000 leagues beyond him. And looking at Letitia Wright's performance, she was so wonderful and funny and joyous in this film, and some of the scenes between her and Chadwick Boseman were some of the most memorable moments in the entire film. They had this really cool kind of brother-sister relationship, and in a lot of ways Shuri was the cue to T'Challa's bond, and that was a really cool dynamic that we've not really seen in a comic book movie before. And that leaves me with Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger, who he's getting a lot of praise in the reviews, and I understand why. This is probably the best introduction of a villain we've seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and possibly one of the best developed villains we've ever seen in a comic book movie. I would probably say that Killmonger has dethroned Loki as my favourite MCU villain, just because Loki has become this kind of joke of a character, and that works for Loki. That's great for that character. He's the god of mischief, so that works for Loki. But what I love about Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger is that if you look at what Killmonger wants to do and what he's fighting for, he does have a really good and kind of valid idea, and ultimately he is trying to do the right thing for Wakanda. It's just his methods and the crazy violent things he does to achieve that vision that make him the villain, and we've never really seen that from a Marvel villain before. And personally, I love the intensity, the emotion, and the ferocity that Michael B. Jordan brought to the film. Alright, so now I'm going to move on to the more negative side of my review, and really, there was only one thing that stopped me from giving Black Panther a perfect score, and that's the CGI. Overall, I'd say that Black Panther is one of the most visually impressive films we've seen in the comic book genre. Everything from the costumes, to the settings, to the cinematography, all of that stuff was incredible and beautiful, especially when you look at Wakanda and how they've managed to bring this incredible place to life. Unfortunately, the visuals are also where Black Panther runs into some trouble and has a few issues, because the final act of the film turns into a massive CGI battle kind of thing, which it's not that uncommon within the superhero genre. It's similar to what happened with Wonder Woman, but in this case, some of the CGI, especially when Black Panther and Killmonger are fighting, some of that CGI looks way too cartoony and video gamey, which for me was a bit of a letdown, especially because all of the other visuals were so amazing. I mean, luckily it wasn't all of the fight scenes, and some of the earlier trial sequences, they looked fantastic. It's just a shame that that final act and that final battle fell into the trap of using way too much CGI. So yeah, overall I think that despite a few issues with the CGI and the visual effects, Black Panther demonstrates what a good story, a great cast, and an even better director can do with an iconic comic book character. Black Panther not only stands as one of the Marvel Cinematic Universe's best films, in my opinion, but thanks to Ryan Coogler's ability to tell a great story and introduce fully realised characters and locations, the film helps to raise the comic book genre to exciting new heights. And just on a final note, I want to say that the score from Ludwig Göransson, who also composed the score for Creed, that score is one of the best I've heard in a long time. Marvel hasn't really given us many or any good scores for their films, but with Black Panther, they've finally delivered one of the best I've heard from the genre. So yeah, overall, I think it's fair to say that I loved Black Panther, and to give it a score out of 10, I'm going to go with a 9. I did have some issues with CGI there. But yeah, that's it for my review. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
I just want to agree about the whole design of the film. It's something I didn't really mention in my review, but yeah, it does look amazing. And the whole environment of Wakanda was very believable. And the first time we go there, I was pretty stunned. So I do agree about some of the CGI. There was a bit early in the film when there was all the sort of, like, really early in the film, so it's not a spoiler, there's just loads of crowds standing on these cliffs, and on the cinema screen you could kind of clearly see that a lot of them were basically just sort of a CGI model doing the same sort of loop. That did amuse me slightly. But I didn't have too many problems with the CGI as it went on towards the end. I do know what you mean, but I think just because I was already a little bit put off by a lot of the fight scenes, I think that some of the CGI kind of picked it up a bit for me, I guess. But yeah, no, it's interesting to see how different our opinions are on it, but I can see why you like it so much. Like, I'm glad that people are liking this a lot, because I'm hoping that it means that, more films will be able to take chances with diversity casting, because at the end of the day, how many white guys called Chris do we need playing main characters in Marvel films? Because I believe the number is 3 at the moment. So just a bit of difference, seeing some fresh faces and giving opportunities to talented people who don't usually get to step into those roles is something that I'm a big fan of, because it usually makes essentially for better and more interesting films. So yeah, no, I respect Black Panther. I just didn't enjoy it all that much.
Yeah, just to touch on what you were saying there with the diversity, for me, I don't really understand why any studio would even really see it as a risk. Audiences, myself included, I feel like they like to go out and see a film that shows them something that they've never really seen before. I mean, New York is the setting of pretty much every Hollywood movie, and if it's not New York, it's LA. So for me, it was interesting to get out of America and explore a different culture and a different people, and clearly that's what everyone seems to want looking at the box office results of Black Panther. I mean, it crushed its opening weekend and it's making hundreds of millions of dollars. So the fact that people still think it's a risk to do this kind of movie and to make something like Wonder Woman, it's mind-boggling, and hopefully Black Panther will help change that in the future. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this review. Let us know what you thought of Black Panther in the comment section below. Next week we'll be ranking our top 5 Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, so make sure you subscribe and don't miss that episode. You can listen on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube and SoundCloud, so make sure you head over to whichever one of those you want and subscribe. And again, thanks for listening.
Yep, have a good one, guys. You're all awesome.